Welcome. In this video, I want to talk about various endpoint visibility settings in Choreo. For that, we will use a simple Python Flask application. So I have my application open right here. So if you look at it, let's look at the contents of app.py, and it has a single route called slash hello, and then it returns hello world. So when we run this, we can run this through this G unicorn uh, web app that's in Python. Once it starts, it's listen on port 5000, and then we can do curl here, post 5000 and hello. We should be able to get a response, and sure enough, it prints out hello world. So that is the Python service. So when we are bringing this Python service to Choreo, we need a couple of things. Let's look at the directory structure again. First, we need to add this requirements.txt, which list out all the dependencies, dependent libraries in Python, so that at the build time, it will install these dependencies. So right now, I have Flask and Gunicorn as dependencies. And also we have to add this proc file. So proc file basically a way to tell the system when it starts up, what is the command to start, so that it will start the application itself. And also we need another thing that basically telling Choreo what port to use and what kind of endpoint visibility that this service should have by default. So how to do that is you have to create a folder called Choreo and then create a file called this endpoints.yaml. Look at the contents of it. This is a template that I didn't lose the comments. So I just copy pasted and then changed a few things. What you would have to change is the name of the endpoint, and of course the port, and what kind of a service this is, whether it's a REST service, GraphQL, gRPC, TCP, etc., and the network visibility. So right now I have set this to public, and also the context where our service is listening to. You can keep this context as a slash if you have multiple REST resources, and then we'll look at how to route that as well. But right now we are just pointing to this slash hello context path. So when we deploy this to Choreo, to save some time, I already deployed this to Choreo, and then we can test by going to the test console here, and then it automatically generates us this Open API specification. We didn't mention, or we didn't point this to an Open API specification, so it generates the default resource for us, which is anything that we passed as context will be passed to the backend service. So if we look at the get request here, we can try it out. Then we can execute, and then sure enough, we get the response as hello world. So the context of this video is basically endpoint visibility. So now we'll go to the overview section, and you can see this has two different endpoints. So project endpoint and a public endpoint. So the reason is that we mentioned that our endpoint is public in our endpoints.yaml file, and then it generates a public endpoint. In the public endpoint means that you can even from outside we can talk to that endpoint. Like for example, let's go to our console here, and then let's invoke this, try it out again. So it generates this curl response here. So if you just copy paste this curl response, copy this entire thing, and then let's go to a terminal and then paste it, and sure enough we get hello world because we expose this as a public endpoint. Now I also have the option of making this as a kind of a private endpoint, in the sense I can if I go here, go to Choreo, endpoints.yaml, and I can change this visibility to project. What it means is that now any component that is deployed within my project, within this project, will be able to hit this endpoint. So that's, let's say that's what I want to do, and then let's commit endpoints. Ability to project. Let's push this. So now we pushed a change. So let's go and trigger a new build as well. And in a little bit, it'll start showing us the progress of the build. So after building this change, let's deploy that and then see what happens to our endpoint. And the build is progressing. We'll let it run for a 2 seconds here, and then once it completes, we'll go to the deploy section and then deploy this service. Now our build is successful, so we'll go to the deploy section and then deploy this change. And in a few seconds, it'll say deployment is now successful. Then we can go to our overview section and look at the endpoint visibility setting. Now the deployment is active. So let's go to our overview section. And now, as you can see, the public endpoint disappeared. So now this endpoint is exposed at the project level. Now, if you go to the test console to test this service, now you will see now this project endpoint is not accessible. So it's not, we can't test it through the inbuilt console. This is often a confusion point to new users to Choreo, because this can be surprising, because now this service can only be accessed from another service using the project level URL. So why this happens is that we have to look at the way the Choreo is architected. So Choreo has this control plane, data plane split. So we have a control plane web application. That is the application that we are using here. So that is implemented as a React web application, and then it runs on user's browser. And the web app again talks to a set of backend APIs to do deployment actions, to trigger deployment actions, create builds, and so on. And these backend APIs are responsible for deploying this service into a Kubernetes cluster. Now, let's focus on this Kubernetes cluster data plane a little bit. We have our React app, the backend service. So I expanded this data plane. And then I have my organization, which is the organization I'm in right now, which is like a namespace. And there's a namespace for a project. And we have our component. So within the organization, we have this our project. And then within the project, we have our component, which is our Python service. So now if you look at the endpoint visibility settings, there are it helps to put this into this mental model of having different API gateways at different levels. So when I have my Python services endpoint visibility as project, it uses this API gateway to expose my service. And of course, when I expose at this level, I can't get to this endpoint because the web application is running on user's desktop and there's no way for this to work. Similar for project organization level visibility as well. But when you have public level visibility, of course, since this URL is accessible from outside, the testing console works because now we can get to this endpoint. So how do you go about testing a project level endpoint? So the trick is just to change the visibility again to public, and then your test console will start working again. And then when you're happy with it, you can just change it to public, project, and then only project URL will be visible, and your public URL will disappear when you change the visibility level. So that's how you can go about testing your public services, and then make them private, so that when you're ready, it's not accessible from outside, only accessible within other components deployed in the same project. Thank you.